On today's Locked On Jayhawks, is this game to save the season? For KU, we preview Jayhawks and Cyclones.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? Derek Johnson here at D Johnson Radio on Twitter, at Derek Johnson on Blue Sky. And thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page. Thank you to everydayers catching all our shows. And thank you for making it your first listen every day. We are going to be breaking down Kansas Iowa State, preview of the game. We'll get into the Iowa State scouting report, the keys to the game, what matchups could determine it for KU, players to watch for the Jayhawks, a little bit about what happened in the first go-around and the importance of this one for KU. Let's start right there. But first, this episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here this Sunday, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com, and you can get started today. So Kansas taking on Iowa State. This is an 8 o'clock game on a Monday, and it's weird because a couple things coming into this game as we look at the headlines. One, is this an opportunity for Kansas to save their season, so to speak, right? I think that the question is two-pronged. One, if you view it from the standpoint of does the season need saving, first of all, would be the first part of that, because you could point to places like Ken Palm and Bart Torvik that still have this team, as maybe a top 15, top 12 team in the country and say, okay, I get it. They're not as good as normal, but does it really need saving? They're going to be okay either way. The other side of it is the bar at Kansas is so high. You're competing for national championships, Final Fours, yada, yada, yada. And that if you lose this game, it's going to feel like after, on the wings of what happened in the Houston game and then what happened in Baylor game on Saturday, it's going to feel like it's game over at this point. And what does game over mean? Does it mean you're not going to make the tournament? No, I don't think so. But does it mean that it's just going to feel like whatever happens the rest of the way is kind of just leading up to, a first weekend exit in the NCAA tournament? I feel like that is kind of the case here. And the other part of this too is I kind of wonder, is this the worst that KU fans during Bill Self's time, certainly at Kansas, that they have ever felt about a home game in Lawrence? And I'd be curious for the older heads too, who are listening to this, is this, I don't know, I guess point being, most other games, most other seasons, when you say, okay, Kansas is playing this team at home. Of course, we've seen Kansas lose at home, and that doesn't mean they win every game at home, but they win a majority of their games at home. They rarely lose at home. And most times when you are coming into a game, and it is a game in Allen Fieldhouse, you're sitting there going, well, we'll get them at home, right? They're going to win that one at home. And then you're almost just shocked and surprised when they lose the game. And I feel like for maybe the first time that I can ever remember since I've been, talking KU and stuff like that, this feels like one in fans that I've talked to, at least, right? This just could be the small circle that I'm operating in, right? It doesn't represent everybody, but of where there are a lot of fans that are like, no, I'm kind of expecting to lose a home game. I'm expecting to lose on Monday night. I'm expecting to lose this game in Allen Fieldhouse. And I don't know if that comes from the confidence or lack thereof of this team right now. You've already lost 2 home games. So just there's a lot of reasons why that would be the case. Iowa State's obviously a good team. Iowa State's coming off a bad loss too. But it just feels like this is the worst that KU fans have felt about protecting your home court, protecting Allen Fieldhouse, that I can certainly remember in my time, again, like I said, kind of talking KU here. So I just think that's very interesting. And really for both teams, this is a game that you're trying to respond. I mean, Kansas is trying to respond after those games I just mentioned. Iowa State just lost by almost 20 points at home to Kansas State. They are clearly going to come out pissed off. And this is something I mentioned in the recap from the KU Baylor game. Thank you if you already tuned into that one, that I have confidence that Iowa State, the way they play, the way they're coached, the way their roster's put together, coming off a loss like that, which for them was probably pretty embarrassing, they're going to come out and play pissed off. They're going to come out and play with an added, anger and attitude coming into this game. My worry is that in theory, you would hope Kansas, after the way they lost that Baylor game, would do the same. But I don't know that we've seen much over these past couple seasons to make you think that they will come out with that type of attitude. So we'll see how it goes in this one. Now, when you look back to that first matchup between Kansas and Iowa State wins 74-57. it was a game that I don't think the final score was fully indicative of, just how far apart they were that night. I think Iowa State on the season is the better team, and Iowa State was playing at home, and I don't think Kansas played very well. So, Iowa State, I think, clearly deserved to win the game. I think, though, you look at it, they outscored you 23-12 over the final 10 minutes, and really that got away over the final 5 minutes or so of the second half. This was a 1-2 possession game, whatever, in around the 5-minute mark. So I think it was a little closer than the 17 might indicate. But what I find interesting, some numbers in this one. I mean, Zeke Mayo was the only double-digit scorer for KU. He had 17 points. This was one of his best games of the season on the road so far this year. But you look at Iowa State, and they had 4 players hit double-digit points. Curtis Jones was unbelievable, 25 points. Jefferson, Lipsy both had 10, and then Deshaun Jackson, they couldn't stop him at 17, 9 of 11 on free throws in the game. You look at Iowa State at a 35% offensive rebound rate. Kansas only had 23%, so that was clearly a big difference in this game. Kansas, horrible shooting free throws, 4 of 11, which that's kind of been a consistent theme for KU outside of really that home UCF game here of late, that they just have not shot free throws well so far this season. The big one there is the turnovers. Kansas had 17 turnovers, and Iowa State had 13 of their own, so it kept sort of close, but there were a lot of really bad, lazy, dumb turnovers for KU in this game. The other stat that sticks out is the 11 steals on the 17 turnovers. And then beyond that, the 10 blocks. Kansas ended up with 10 blocks in this game. And then the final stat that I think kind of is interesting here is, obviously there's been a lot of talk since the Baylor game about why did he only play 4 minutes in the second half? Well, he only played 11 minutes in the first meeting with Iowa State. But he had 4 blocks in 11 minutes. Now, he did have 3 turnovers, so, yes, that does matter. He did have 4 fouls, so that obviously limited playing time. But I think it'll be interesting to see his usage in this game. Same with Rylan Griffin, who did play 19 minutes, but it certainly felt like a game when going back and watching the Iowa State game was it felt like he just wasn't really, on the floor all that much. So that's kind of what happened in that first go-around between the two teams. Now, you look at what Iowa State is coming into this matchup with. They're 17-4 now on the season, 7-3 in Big 12 play. They could really use this win if they want to try to win the conference, because losing their last 2 has put them in a more difficult position to try to win the Big 12. They've also lost 3 of their last 5 since that Kansas win. They lost at West Virginia by 7. Then they had back-to-back wins over at home against UCF and then on the road against Arizona State, and now back-to-back losses, overtime at Arizona and at home against Kansas State. And that is certainly scary, because when I see a team that is as good as Iowa State is, how often do those teams lose 3 in a row? So it'll be very interesting. They come into this one top 20 offensively, top 10 on the defensive end of the court. When you look at Ken Palm's adjusted offensive and defensive efficiency, when you look into the player personnel of note, I mean, obviously Curtis Jones, who went off in that first meeting, he's averaging 18 points per game. He's shooting 38% from 3. Keyshawn Gilbert over 15 points per game, 4.5 assists. He's shooting 51 from the floor, 33 from 3. Tameen Lipsy, 11 points, 3 assists, over 2 steals, great defender, 49% from the floor, 34 from 3. It's a great guard trio between those 3 guys. Joshua Jefferson, 13 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals. He does everything, 53%, 33 from 3. Then you have Deshaun Jackson, who killed you in the first game, 9 points, 5 rebounds per game, 57% from the floor. Momcilovic was injured in that one, and he is still injured, so they don't have him. And that certainly is correlated with some of their recent struggles here. Nate Heisey, who is a transfer, did really well as a previous stop, but only shooting 24% from 3 here at Iowa State. And then Brandon Chatfield is their other big man, who he's not as good as Jackson, but he starts over 3 points, over 3 rebounds per game, 57% from the floor. So those are some of the players to watch for them. Now, you look at what they do well, what they don't do well. This is a team who plays very fast so far this season. We talked about this in the first matchup. They're top 30 in the country in average possession length on the offensive end of the court. So it's not your same old grind it to a halt, Iowa State offense. If we look at Big 12 only numbers, they're second in terms of being the fastest team in the conference. In Big 12 only numbers as well, they are 4th in offensive rebound rate. They've been a good offensive rebounding team so far this season, and that number is also top 75 nationally. They're 3rd in conference-only games in getting to the free throw line, which is a top 40 rate nationally if you take in all the games. They're also shooting 35.1% from 3, so that's going to get it done. Certainly, KU hasn't had that quite same success so far this season. The offense hasn't been as efficient, though, in conference play to the regular season. Overall, including the non-con, they're 17th in the country in adjusted offense efficiency. But in conference-only play, they're 6th of 16 teams. So they've still been good, but not quite as dominant. The big difference has been in conference play, the two-point shooting has taken a severe drop from where it's been overall in the season. You look at the defensive side of the ball, they are third in conference-only games, but they're 6th nationally in all games on defensive efficiency. And the reason why they're so good, this is the number 1 steal rate defense in Big 12 games, which is also top 15 in the country. They have a top 20 turnover rate defense right now, which is second in Big 12 only games. They've been at least an above average defensive rebounding team in conference games. They've been even better over the course of the entirety of the season. They don't really send teams to the free throw line that often, which is good for them. And they have a really good 2-point defense, top 35 nationally, third in Big 12 only games. So they force a lot of steals. They get extra possessions on the offensive end of the court. They shoot threes well. They play fast. They play physical. They play tough. It's a really fun team because you have really good guard play and you have a team who hustles and plays tough. And I think there are a lot of Kansas fans that probably are a little bit jealous in terms of what TJ Otzelberger has on his team right now. Let's get to our matchups of the game. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Our episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, 2 teams, endless possibility. And there's no better ways to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app and head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That is at FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59 and the Locked On Podcast Network. Continuing on with our show, we're going to get to matchups of the game. I think I might rebrand this soon to keys to the game because I feel like that's what it ends up being. But we'll get to that, and then we'll get to players to watch. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. Don't forget to check out Locked On College Basketball for your second listen every day. Okay, so what are our keys to the game, I guess, so to speak, for KU? So number 1 is going to be one that is kind of an internal thing. It's certainly a key talking point among KU basketball fans these days. I'm going to go with play Flory and Rylan. So this goes twofold. One, I think this is just like an overall thing on the season to where it's like, I think this is helpful for KU. I think Flory Bidunga is the best player on Kansas. Now, I do understand Hunter Dickinson has unbelievable production, and I'm not saying that you need to play Flory 30 minutes a night and Hunter 20. No, that's not what I'm saying. And in fact, I think the Hunter and Flory lineups work actually pretty well next to each other. And there are a lot of stats that would back that up. And obviously Flory has to deal with, foul stuff as being a young freshman big man that, I'm not asking for him to necessarily play 30 minutes a night, but can he get 22, 25 consistently barring that sort of thing? And I look at it again, those 4 blocks he had in like 11 minutes in the first matchup with Iowa State. He is a game changer on both ends of the court. He makes you a much better offensive rebounding team, which helps the KU offense overall. He gives you another finisher around the rim, which, even though he doesn't have shooting range, you're not getting shooting range from KJ either, but Flory is going to present a bigger threat at finishing at the rim in addition to the offensive rebounding. And then the defensive end of the court, like even if sometimes it is statistical, right? Like getting extra blocks or whatever. Other times it doesn't show up on the stat sheet. It's things like maybe guys don't even take the shot that they would have taken if Flory isn't in there because they're worried about Flory blocking the shot from somewhere inside. I think he is just such a game changer, and I'm worried about how that Baylor game went. His 4 minutes in the second half, the quotes from after the game, I don't think they can afford. In a game where you are playing a really good opponent at home, you need your best players on the court a little bit more. The other part of this is Rylan Griffin, and I think part of that is that I don't know that Rylan Griffin actually is one of the 4 or 5 best players on the team. I don't know. I'd have to think it out. Maybe he would be in there. But I definitely think he's one of the 4 or 5 most valuable players on the team. And what do I mean by that? So again, I think maybe he would be, the more I think about this. But regardless, the value, I think, is even more prominent here for Rylan Griffin because even in games where Rylan Griffin does score 4 points or score 6 points, it's a different level of impact on the offensive end than when somebody else scores 6, right? because Rylan Griffin, his gravity, his spacing is opening up the floor for Hunter Dickinson, for Flory Bidunga, driving lanes for DeJuan Harris. When KJ Adams is in there to throw down a dunk, I think Rylan Griffin helps other players be better, right? I just think having him out there opens things up in that real way. What I find to be very interesting so far this season, when you look at the games where Rylan Griffin has given you multiple made three-pointers, you have a win over North Carolina, you have a win over Michigan State, which is probably your second best win of the season to this point, win over Oakland, which, it is what it is, win over UCF. You do have the loss at Baylor, which, that was probably more about the defense, giving up 60 in the second half. And then the loss to Houston, which you should have won. Like, this team is such a much better team when he's playing those high-level minutes. Then you look at the games where he's played the biggest minute totals. Michigan State's his biggest minute total. They won that game again, second best win of the season. Houston's his second, which, again, they should have beat Houston, one of the best teams in the country. NC State, which was a blowout win. UCF, which was a win. The at Baylor one, which we just talked about. Oakland, UNC Wilmington, and the win at TCU. Like, those are all the games that he's played 20 or more minutes. I think that's been pretty successful. And then you look at what Iowa State does. They are going to pack the inside of the defense, and they are going to actually be okay giving up above the break threes. They give up a high rate of above the break threes this season. Rylan Griffin can take advantage of those. So I would like to see, and we've seen him play well in big moments, whether it was last year at Alabama or some of the games this year for Kansas. I just mentioned Michigan State, Houston, right? Play Flory and Rylan. Now, my confidence level that these things will happen, that would be a different question. Number two, turn Iowa State over. So Iowa State's 3 worst turnover games this season, they're all with turnover rates of 20% or higher. All 3 of them are losses, which means they're 17-1 in the other games. Now, in the first game, Kansas did force 13 turnovers, which is pretty good. It was an 18% turnover rate. So they were actually pretty close to that 20% turnover rate. The problem was you had more turnovers. And so maybe this comes down to more about like turnover differential. Like, can you hold on the ball and force them? Right? Because if you force 18 turnovers, but you turn it over 20 times, I guess that doesn't really matter. So it kind of becomes the turnover differential. Kansas, can you get down to 11, 12, 13 in this game? And can you force 15 or 16 from Iowa State that kind of swings it the other way? And the fact that it was close in that first matchup does give me hope that you can do it this go around, and maybe that is something that they'll be able to accomplish. All right, key number 3, matchup number 3, whatever you want to call it, get Hunter Dickinson going. Because you look at the game that happened in Ames, and Hunter was not really a factor. He only had 6 points. He was 3 of 10 shooting in the game in Ames. But last year when you played him in Ames, he was really good. He had a double-double. He had 20 points for you. He hit some big buckets late as KU kind of crept back into that one and almost found their way to, pull a road victory, and then Iowa State just kept hitting those threes. But, they need to find a way to get him going in this game. And for Kansas' best shot at winning, like, you're going to have to get easy buckets. Typically, what is the easiest bucket that Kansas is getting right now? It's usually Hunter being able to make, a high percentage of shots on the block and in the post. So for Kansas to win this game, like, I don't think you can win with Hunter Dickinson scoring 10 points. And I know there are like exceptions to the rule. If they're triple teaming him or they're double teaming him all game, then maybe it comes down to just Hunter needs to have a game where he has 6 assists or whatever. Kansas needs to find a more consistent way to get it to him on the block, and he has to have a bigger impact in this one than he did in Ames. I think that's for certain. Let's finish up here with players to watch. This is Locked on Jayhawks. What's happening? Welcome back to Locked on Jayhawks. We will have a Kansas-Iowa State recap coming at you late Monday night into your Tuesday morning right here with Locked on Jayhawks. I'll get into a little bit about looking ahead to the 2025 to 2026 season later in the week here with Locked on Jayhawks. And then later this weekend, we'll have another preview for the Kansas State game, which, don't look now, Kansas State actually playing good basketball. They won at Iowa State. They won 3 straight games. I think Bart Torvik over those last 3 games rates them the number 1 team in the country. So they're playing really good basketball right now. That'll be a tough one for KU. All right, what is our player matchup to watch here between Kansas and Iowa State? Let's just go back to what the last game told us. That's that Curtis Jones and Zeke Mayo are going to go off, right? I mean, Curtis Jones, 25 points, Zeke Mayo, 17, 42 combined points between the two players. Let's just go with that. Now, we know that with Curtis Jones, I don't know how much Zeke Mayo is going to guard him. I mean, especially after the game he went off, you would think Bill Self is going to say, hey, we'll put mostly DeJuan Harris and Shaquille Moore on him, though then again, Shaquille Moore hasn't played as much these last few games, so then it leaves you in a situation where it's like maybe Zeke does have to guard him, right? At the very least, we know Kansas switches stuff, so there will be certain possessions where Zeke has to guard him, and that'll be difficult because Zeke hasn't been the best defender in the world, and as good as he's been on the offensive end, that'll be a tough matchup for him to try to slow down Curtis Jones. Now, at the other end, Zeke was really good in that matchup of names. 17 points. He struggled a little bit more this season in the road than he has at home. I've brought this up several times. If you're an everydayer, you know this about some of the home road splits for Zeke Mayo. And these are the updated numbers for Zeke. He's on the road. He's at 10 points per game. He's shooting 39% from the floor, 28% from three, 50% at the foul line. So it hasn't been the same. But he has had some games like that one where he was good at Iowa State, where he had 17 points, and I guess it wasn't a very efficient 17 points, 3 of 9 from 3, 7 of 19 from the floor. So it could have been better, certainly. But he was the only guy for KU in double digits. So it's like somebody had to take those shots against a good defense. Still, at home, Zeke has been dynamite. 18.1 points per game, 5.5 rebounds per game, 3 assists per game. He is shooting at home in Allen Fieldhouse 48% from the floor, 42% from 3, 83% at the foul line. So he's been super comfortable playing at home. And doing that against an Iowa State team that we mentioned earlier gives up a lot of above-the-break threes. That's Zeke Mayo leads Kansas in above-the-break threes so far this season. I had 17 last matchup. I think Zeke can have a good one here. The one exception is going to be, I'll be very interested. Tamin Lipsey is, I don't know, you could argue Lipsey should be Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year this year. He certainly, I would imagine, will be on the Big 12 All-Defensive team. Excellent defensive point guard for Iowa State. They had him guarding DeJuan Harris, and it caused DeJuan some issues. He had some bad turnovers in that game. Lipsey was all over him. And I wonder if they continue to do that to say, like, hey, he's initiating the offense. He's the lead ball handler here. Let's continue to cause him problems, and it's going to lead to other problems for the rest of the team. That would certainly make sense. But maybe we do see him a little bit on Zeke Mayo. And then if that's the situation, then it gets a little bit tougher for Zeke. And then a guy like DeJuan needs to step up in that situation. Now, high on the go-off meter, barring that happening, I am going to actually go Zeke Mayo. Again, I mean, they give up a ton of above-the-break threes. Zeke Mayo leads Kansas in that area. He shot them well so far this season. And as we just went over the home road splits, like Zeke Mayo has been pretty nails at home. And it's hard to pick another player right now because it's like, if I go through the list and we're going on the go-off meter, okay, it's like offensive end of the court. I'm not really going to pick KJ in that situation. Hunter is usually an easy pick here, but he had 6 points in aim. So clearly they were trying to take him away and did so pretty successfully. So I don't want to pick that. Flory, as much as I'd love to pick him, I don't know how much Bill Self's going to play him or Ryland Griffin for that matter. So then you end up in this situation where it's like, okay, well, I'm left with a couple guys. Do I go with DeJuan Harris, who did hit a game winner against Iowa State in that would have been his sophomore season? Against the Cyclones in the 21-22 season when they won the national title, hit that little runner from the right. So maybe there's good vibes for him, but yeah, I'll go with Zeke Mayo here at home for the Jayhawks. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page. We'll be back later tonight for a Kansas-Iowa State recap. See you then with LOJ.